Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mayor's Office. The year in Pacifica is 2023 as I sit here, and therefore I am Mayor Tygarjas, Twyrls, Bigstyck. Welcome to my office. Rather than the usual philosophical meanderings that I tend to engage in at the beginning of these things, I thought I'd kind of dive in by showing you all who is with me. This is Vice Mayor of the fine city of South San Francisco, Mark Nagales. This is the Vice Mayor of the fine city of Millbrae, Maurice Goodman, and this is City Council member from the fine city of Millbrae, and presumably Mayor-elect Anders Fung. And the reason why I've assembled this fine group of gentlemen is because there was, let's say, some strangers to our land joined us September 25th. These voices that came from places presumably not Pacifica to utter a lot of, vulgarities, let's say. We'll go to the vulgarity level. That was not becoming of our chambers, and neither any other chamber in San Mateo County, or dare I say, anywhere on this planet, should it have a comfortable place. And so I thought to myself, well, what's the best way for me to respond to this aside from the general community responses that I think we all hopefully admirably engaged in, having those conversations around remote comment periods. I wanted to bring together a diverse group of fellow electeds from the region. You may notice that there are no women at this dais tonight. Frankly, I reached out to Julia Mates of Belmont because of her work with the Bay Area Network of Jewish Organizers. Sadly, she wasn't able to join us, but she referred me to Mr. Mark Nagales, who recently had some problems with the Zoom bombing in South City himself. It also occurred to me that Lisa Gaucher, who is a council member in East Palo Alto, and I think will soon be running for a seat as District 4 County Supervisor, would be cool to have too. But frankly, my friend Maurice was somebody I wanted to have here, and so I want female representation, but when she told me she couldn't make it, I was kind of happy about it, in the sense that I was looking forward to having a conversation with my friend here, so it wasn't for a lack of trying. So the disclaimers all having been said and some introductions more or less been made, why don't we start with just going around and giving a little background, and let's start with Mr. Nagales of South City. Who are you?
Who am I? That's a great question. First of all, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the lovely invitation. As I was driving to Pacifica, as I got over the ridge, I saw that beautiful ocean that really is kind of the staple for Pacifica, and it's nice to be here. My name is Mark Nagales. I am the Vice Mayor for the city of South San Francisco. How I got into this field was because of my love of my city, actually. When I had a very young family, my wife and I, and my son was probably 2 years old at the time. We were renting in South San Francisco, and I had a conversation with my wife that I thought I would never have, and that was, I think we might need to move away because it was too expensive to live in South San Francisco. And I got very, very lucky that I was able to get a first-time homebuyer's loan through HART of San Mateo County.
And HART stands for?
Housing, Endowment, and Regional Trust. So, and they help individuals in San Mateo County to obtain a first-time homebuyer's loan. And thanks to them, I was able to get a first-time homebuyer's loan, and I was able to stay in South San Francisco. And I've never forgotten that feeling of almost moving away, that feeling, to that feeling of knowing that I was able to stay in the community that I love. And I kind of used that experience to kind of fuel me to run for public office, because I know that not everyone has that opportunity or that help, and I wanted to give back, and that's kind of where I am right now. So again, thank you for the invitation and being with some great gentlemen here. So.
My pleasure, and I agree. We're in very good company tonight. The first time I met you, I think, as I've been for the last almost 2 decades now as a checker at Safeway, And you were working with Jackie Spear, were you not?
I was her senior aide, and one of the things that she's known for is doing a day in the life. And one of the things that I suggested to her was actually work at a Safeway. And this was when I was a staffer for the Congresswoman, and we decided to go to your Safeway in Pacifica, and we were very fortunate that you were the person assigned to us. And I learned a lot that day from you, and we've been friends ever since. So, and look at us now. So.
Yeah, I think when that day occurred, it did not occur to me I would be mayor and having a conversation of this nature with you at this table. So
absolutely.
Life is a trip sometimes, as they say. Mr. Goodman.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Maurice Goodman, and I guess my story starts in San Francisco. I was born and raised in San Francisco, definitely not with a spoon in my mouth. Actually born and raised in the projects of what they call the part of the city that's known as Fillmore, or the Western Addition. And I was raised ultimately by my grandmother, because my mother passed when I was 8 years old. And a lot of who my grandmother was instilled in me at an early age, that early age of 8 on, moving to Daly City, and then ultimately going to school here in San Mateo County and going to Jefferson High School. And every step of the way, I feel like little moments were instilled in me, little seeds were planted. I can remember as early as 6 years old on a Christmas weekend when we were told, hey, they're giving away bicycles and toys and things like that up at the church. We went up to the church, and I was met by a white woman. And that white woman to this day turns out to be Dianne Feinstein, then mayor of the city.
Wow.
And growing up in the projects where you see only people that look like you, and then to have this white woman hand out a bicycle to me and for me to receive it meant so much. And it was so impactful at that time. And I was always wondering when I got back home and throughout my life, I was like, why did she give that to me? Why did she waste her time to come to us? And so I always wanted to be to us and to others what we wish we had at that time and what she meant to us by taking her time out of her day as an elected official. I didn't know at the time. I was so perplexed at why did she, didn't look like me, care about me? And so that was a seed that was planted. I can remember in high school when Jesse Jackson was running for president, another pivotal point in my life because he lost. And then he ran again. And at that same time, I was a freshman in high school. I ran for student government, class president, I think it was. I lost. But because of his perseverance, I said, hey, I'm going to keep going. I ran the next year, won the next year, ran the next year, I won the next year. And before I knew it, I was just doing it. And not leadership was at the forefront, but caring was at the forefront. And so just different points in my life, having people and moments pour into me and create this foundation of really caring and being a steward in whatever you do. And so that's who I am in a nutshell. I see myself as a steward, a public servant. I like to always say if people get out of pocket, and I would say, hey, I'm a public servant. I'm not your servant. And so, but I stay true to who I am, and I try to be true to our community. And so that's what makes me me, and that's one reason why I'm here today.
How old did you say you were when Dianne Feinstein handed you that?
Around 6.
6.
Yeah.
And the way you referred to it, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Why would she waste her time on me?
That's what it felt like. It was like, because in the community.
To feel that not valuable as a 6-year-old child. And then all it took was a moment to maybe start breaking away from that and having a different perspective?
Yeah. Yeah, no, as a young kid, I saw a lot, things that I probably would never say publicly of what I experienced, what I witnessed. But to see compassion, we saw compassion of people that look like us to us. The grandmother down the street on her way home, you better get home or I'm going to tell your mom. You better get home, I'm going to tell your grandma. But there was never that sense of, if you don't look like me, I should care about you. There just seemed to be, at that moment, there seemed to be a connection that we were all connected. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fung, welcome.
Thank you, Tiger. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for welcoming me to your city. My name is Andrews Fung, and I'm a council member at the city of Millbrae. And I came to the country just about 32 years ago, at 1991. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, grew up in a government subsidized housing project. And my father was a taxi driver. My mother was a homemaker, raised 3 children, and then I have 2 older sisters. So when I came to the country, it was about 18 years old. And quite frankly, one of the main reasons I came to the country was because at that time, I didn't really have an opportunity to go to a higher education. So my parents saw an opportunity where we could come to this country, and from their perspective, for the sake of this child and his sisters, they made a decision and came to this promised land. And so I was fortunate enough when I came to the country that I have another chance at life for the most part. A higher education. For the most part, I went through college with government subsidy and between grants and student loans. I was able to complete my education. Build a career for myself and have a family. And right around 2015 is when I started to meet a group of volunteers and community volunteers who spend a lot of time and spend a lot of effort on raising funds for school. And that's Peninsula Chinese Business Association. And that, right around 2017 is when there was an opportunity in the city of Millbrae where a planning commission spot was opening up. And that's when I was encouraged by the community to look to seek that position. And I was fortunate enough to be appointed. And that was the beginning of my public service career. And one thing led to another, and as the former mayor willingly turns out, at 2020, there was an opportunity for an open council seat, and I ran, and I was successful in getting elected. And that's what leads me here today. And the feeling of being able to come to this country as a first-generation immigrant and be able to give back. What I wanted to give back the most was looking at the mirror that I was that kid who came off that airplane 32 years ago. And I want every kid today that come off the same airplane, the same airport, to have the same opportunity as I had, so that they can do a better job than I can. Because this country gave me the opportunity at life that I otherwise wouldn't have. And I want to ensure every child who came to this country, who came to this promised land, to have the same opportunity as I did 32 years ago. So, and I'm thankful for this country, and I'm thankful for the community who have given me the support and that same opportunity that I want to make sure everybody has.
And you're invoking in me the classical American dream and seeing the Statue of Liberty and it being the land of opportunity. It seems as though you came at an early age and began your dream as this country in my view, would intend, and then wish fairly quickly after that to pass that dream on to anyone else who would seek opportunity?
Absolutely. I believe that, it's one of those things where this is a promised land, but that promise is not just given to you. You have to work at it. You have to want it. And when you get it, it's your job to also pass it on to the next generation so that everybody else can live that same dream. And that's how we move together as a community and get better every day. And that's how we improve. I believe that those who has the ability to make a difference should have a responsibility to make that difference. So if I have that tiny ability to do so, I want to make sure every kid enjoy that same opportunity.
Amen. Well, I am very blessed to be sitting amongst you three, all of whom have rather remarkable stories and perspectives. So as I said earlier, the reason I wanted to do this was because we had some shenanigans in our council chambers September 25th. And as I said, specifically I invited you, Mr. Nagales, because I hear tell South San Francisco had to deal with some of the same. I will switch to first names at some point, by the way. I think as I'm kind of exploring the gravity of the subject matter at hand, it invokes kind of a natural formality into me, and I think that'll start passing by the wayside. But if you want to tell us the story of what South San Francisco got to enjoy in your turn.
I wouldn't say we enjoyed it per se, but it's just any regular city council meeting. It was the portion in the council where there's public comment, and we allow for the public to participate through Zoom if they wanted to provide a public comment. And everything was going normal, and then all of a sudden, there was one individual who was actually talking about how he was happy about what the city was doing in terms of just development and how the council works together. And all of a sudden, the comments turned and it became anti-Semitic. And I was shocked to hear the vile comments that came out of that person. And I think all of us were kind of just like, what just happened? And then another person came on and did the exact same thing by talking about Jewish individuals, Jewish people, members of the LGBTQ community, African Americans, Asians. It shocked me to the core to hear what was happening in my city. And then it happened again, 3 times in a row. But during the third kind of comment, I got up and I said, I'm not going to listen to this anymore. And I just started walking off the dais. And as I turned around, I noticed my colleagues started walking off the dais. And we just sat down and we just let the person just talk. When that person was done, there was no any further comments. We got back up and it was council's turn for council's comments. And I immediately wanted to go first. And I denounced those hateful, vile, disgusting comments. And I apologized to the people in the audience and to the people that were watching from home, saying that this does not reflect South San Francisco, that we are a welcoming city, that we are a loving city, and that regardless of who you are, who you love, what your economic status is, that you will always be welcomed in South San Francisco. And then my colleagues also started saying the same thing. They were also saying that those comments do not reflect the values of South San Francisco. And I was very proud of my colleagues for doing that. But I didn't want just to end it there. So after the council meeting, I posted something on Twitter saying that we got zoomed, bombed. And I got so much support from the community saying, thank you for standing up and letting people know who South City really is. And so I reached out also to the Jewish Community Resource Center, JCRC, because I didn't want to just end it there. I wanted to show everyone that South City will not tolerate this hate. So we passed a resolution basically proclaiming again that South San Francisco is a welcoming city, and we denounce all forms of hate, and that we are a welcoming city. And I was really proud of my colleagues for standing up, because they could have just took it and just let it happen. But they all got out and said, no, this is not who we are. And if you look at the kind of the makeup of our council, it is absolutely diverse. We have members of the LGBT community, we have Asians, we have a Hispanic on the community, on the council. It really reflects who we are as a council. And to stand up against the hatred that came to our city makes me so proud to say that we are South San Francisco. And so I know that if that ever happens again, we will do the same thing again and push back and say, not in our city.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think my community would have preferred I respond in some of those ways when it came to Pacifica. I took a very different tact, and I had just been in Cal City's conference learning about, well, if something like this happens, they have First Amendment rights, and you treat everybody equally. So if you're thanking anybody, you really should thank everybody. And so I kind of had that embed in my head on the one hand, and then I had maybe a 5-minute warning before it happened. Hey, this kind of thing is happening everywhere, and we think it might happen here. And then sure enough, it did. And I'm built of a slightly different character where I analyze things to the point of, oh, you want to get a rise out of me. And then I switch gears not to immediately denounce and show my emotion around it, but to look it in the eye and say, and? That's my approach. And meanwhile, like my fellow council people were taken aback. They didn't expect it. I tried to kind of warn Sue Beckmeyer a little bit, and I tried to give everyone a heads up kind of, but I couldn't really tell them exactly what was about to happen.
Yeah.
And frankly, I didn't know what exactly was about to happen. I am the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. And so in my family, like, you get raised with this notion, yeah, at some point they might try and kill us again. And I feel like having that orientation, by the time I got there, it was, oh, it's a neo-Nazi, they're saying vile things. And? Yeah, of course. And I'm also the kind of person who, when in a situation where clearly it's agitating those around me, I tend to be very much not agitated. Like it occurs to my sensibility that I need to be the one who is not agitated when I am suddenly immersed in a situation where people aren't quite sure how to respond. I need to figure out where that exit door is. I need to lead people calmly through it. And so I plastered a smile on my face. As I am accustomed to, thanked each person who commented. After about the third comment, I stopped to try and acknowledge my community. These are people who do not share our values. There are laws governing what they're allowed to do, and so I'm going to allow them their rights. And then I was able to kind of work with city attorney there, who was my wing person, for lack of a better term, and giving me the cues I needed to navigate it to the point of, okay, it seems like we've heard enough now. Let's cut it off at the person whose hand is raised, and then move past it, because we actually have city business, and at this point it's rising to the level of getting in the way of city business. And then after that, at the subsequent meeting, having that conversation with the community around what we want to do with this. Because these people might come back, there are things we can do, things we can't do, and like it or not, as your leader for the time being, this is how I handle it. I don't give a response to someone who's trying to get a response. And what's more, if someone is, what's the opposite of courage? If someone's so cowardly that they can't be bothered to show their face in my chambers and look me in the eye and tell me to my face, not that I want them to show up, by the way, but okay, now I've established you're a coward, on top of being deeply broken to a point where, as it made an impression when you were talking about your sense as a 6-year-old child, maybe you didn't have value. I figure this person probably, and I don't know, but probably came from a place where they were not valued at any point in their life up until they came to the conclusion to just accept being broken and believe in it. And that invokes in me this really deep-seated place of compassion, at least from my perspective, where holy snikes, this person is that broken, and at least right now, they are not capable of knowing better. And so I led it in a slightly different way. Mr. Anders Fung, aside from trying to assemble a diverse group, ethnically if nothing else, you had a very specific experience of June of last year.
Yes.
And I asked you if you'd be willing to maybe tell that story. It's a heavy one, and I would love to hear it from you.
Yeah. It was the same day when we had our brand new rec center open. If I'm not mistaken, it was June 29th of 2022. Just had that celebration of opening this brand new recreation center in Millbrae. And then on that, I think it was a day or 2 days after, my family was due to a trip to New York. And we spent the Sunday afternoon in San Francisco, Langs End, which is near Ocean Beach. It was a federal park, federal facility. So we were just, it was near the Sutro Bath area, and then we were just gonna take a little walk as a family. And then after that, we intend to go back to my mom and have dinners with her, because she lives in the Sunset District. So as I was walking with my family, and I walked by sort of a cave area where there's an overpass right about 25 to 30 feet above. My family already walked through the cave, and then I was following. And before I even get into the cave, something hit me on the head. I have no idea what it was. Just something heavy. Bam, just hit me on the top of the head. And I was immediately knocked to the ground, not knowing what's going on, but I was at least conscious at the time. But I can feel I'm starting to bleed immediately. And then I look up, and then there's 2 young men throwing rocks at us. And then I look down to the ground. I see a piece of concrete about the size of a shoe that still had my blood stain on it. I immediately called my family, and my wife, my daughter came out, just to see what happened to the father. And then they see me bleeding from the head. And then my wife looked up. I told my wife, these are the guys who threw the rock at us. And my wife looked up and told them to stop and said, hey, stop throwing rock at us. Someone already got hurt. And that's when one of those two guys gave her the finger. So at that moment, I realized this was not an accident. It was an active attack. And I still vaguely remember at the same time when I was hit, there was a little Indian girl next to me with her grandmother and her parents right next to me, walking with me. And so right after that, my son also came to my aid. My daughter was brave that she not only was yelling at those guys to stop, she actually ran after those guys as they were walking out, as if they just finished their Sunday ritual. And then she ran after them and tried to take pictures of them. And she eventually got a picture of those two guys leaving the scene. She called the police, and the U.S. Park Police came, and then an ambulance. And then they took me to California Pacific Medical Center on Van Ness. And that was the incident from start to finish on that night. And then I was left with a 2-inch laceration on the back of my head. And it took 6 stitches and about a month to heal up. Fortunately, it didn't go through the skull. Otherwise, this interview wouldn't have me in it, probably. I never thought that this would happen to me. But apparently, violence happens every day. And a lot of, I talked to a lot of the media, talked to a lot of people, talked to many colleagues of mine, and everybody was very kind to me. I never thought, people ask me the question, do you think they attack you because you're an elected official? I never think that I am somebody important enough that need to be assassinated. I don't honestly think that they did what they did because I'm in this job. But what is true is that when I was hit, everyone around me on the ground were Asians. So that's a fact. Whether or not that's what they targeted, unless we can get into the assailant's head, we couldn't find out. But all I can do is offer you the facts. Now, weeks later, after I healed and my family came back, I took my kids back there. Took my wife back to Lang San. They were hesitant to go back. They don't want to relive that experience. Although, what would that leave them if we walk away from this? I want to tell my children that this is our park, that we have a right to be here, just like anybody else. And we will not be afraid to go to our park. The last thing we want to do is to let them win. We're going to live our life the way we were promised to be able to live our life in this country. That's why we came to this country 32 years ago. And we're going to, for the next 32 years, if not 132 years, we will do exactly the same. Because this is the promised land. And we need to live that promise. And we need to fight to live that promise if we have to. And that was the experience. I certainly hope that nobody has to be subject to this. No one should be subject to violence such as this, senseless violence such as this. That's why we must do everything we can, legislatively, budgetary-wise, to ensure these things don't ever happen again. Because had this been that little girl who got the rock instead of me, chances are she wouldn't have made it. Or if there was a senior, or that little grandmother next to that little girl who got hit, chances are she wouldn't make it either. So in a way, I'm glad that it was me instead of them, because at least we're able to bring this to light so everybody knows these things are still happening every day, and we can no longer turn a blind eye on them.
You shouldn't have to be the one to take a rock in the head that could have done, frankly, more damage in order to be able to turn to a camera to say, and here's what it looks like when you lead with courage, perseverance, and with an attitude that, well, no, that's not how we want to do things, and now I'm going to stand right up as soon as those stitches heal and show folks what it looks like to claim the opportunities that should not be stymied by the actions of mere primates.
My wife told me to take a few days off. I tell her that I want my shirt. I'm going to put it back on. I'm going to clean the blood, but I'm going to put my shirt back on and keep doing what I was doing the day before. That's the only way to show the community that this is not something they should be afraid of. Nobody should be afraid. You want to be careful, but you shouldn't be afraid. And that's what I want to tell everyone.
Thank you, and thank you for being here to tell that story. And that's why I brought you here, was to tell each and every one a story. And I think it was frankly this summer, and this is a happy story I'm telling from my experience, and I heard there was going to be a Juneteenth celebration in Millbrae, and I was very excited about this. In fact, I was inspired thereafter to show up at a planning commission meeting on Juneteenth just to say, hi, I'm the mayor, we're not doing anything particularly special, but I wanted to say this is really important, and hopefully our city will get its act together to do a bit more to show that support and make this a proper holiday going forward. But in the meantime, I had the opportunity to go to Millbrae and enjoy your Juneteenth celebration.
Yes.
And for me, that was the beginning of having this really brotherly feeling, frankly, toward you, because I saw the way you were engaging with that festival, and all the color coming out of it, and the traditions of other lands coming into, you know, in an extended way, ours, but yours.
Right.
And it was a really beautiful sight to behold. And I figure, as somebody who is privileged and gets to have it easy, at least to the point of the tone of my skin, when I meet somebody whose skin tone is very different than mine, taking a cursory glance at the history of folks who generally have your skin color, I think to myself, oh, just playing the odds, I bet you got some stories to tell. And so feel free to end it on a high note and tell us something about how Juneteenth came to be. I understand that it was in motion before you even got to council.
Yes.
And how that made you feel. But if you could start a little further back and a little bit more about where you come from and some of what your experiences are, I'd be honored to hear some of those stories if you would be so kind.
Yeah, of course. Again, going back to growing up in Fillmore in the city, and to your point, I don't want to get it twisted, so I was going to definitely circle back to the comment around lack of value, because we still had value. The community had value, but for me and so many others that look like me, it was a rarity that we saw other people that didn't look like us attribute value to us. And so we had our own. We had our own rent parties, and I don't know if any of you know what a rent party is. If someone didn't have rent, we threw a party, and we'd have a money tree, and they'd come in and they'd pay for that, give that money, put money on that tree, and guess what? By the end of that party, you had rent paid. And so there was a sense of community. We had the joys, the happiness, but we had bad times. It was kind of like watching an episode of Good Times, where you know the episode was always going to end with everyone being happy, but throughout that episode, you saw the heart and you saw the struggle that truly goes on in a close-knit community like the one I grew up in. And out of that community in San Francisco, there were a few blocks of just vacant land every year on Fillmore, where we would celebrate Juneteenth for as early as I can remember. And that Juneteenth celebration would have the red drink, it would have talent shows, we'd have fashion shows, dancing, music, everything. Even one year I can recall as a kid watching MC Hammer perform before he was MC Hammer. You know, there were so many different things that you saw. And so for me, as an African American here in San Mateo County, once the holiday was made a national holiday, it was national, so everyone else remembered it and then they recognized it. But for us, we're like, hey, welcome to the party. And it was a welcome to the party to the point where, as I mentioned, the council, prior to me even being considered for a seat on the council, had thought of it. And when you talk about, again, the unity, the community, what Juneteenth, the purpose of it is, it's meant to, the celebration, it was often said that it was the true Independence Day, because it meant independence for all people. And so by adding that and then having the holiday recognized and then having community members that didn't look like me, again, going back to that moment when I was 6 years old, to have a gift given to me by someone that didn't look like me and attribute value not just to me. Now you're attributing value to my entire community, to my entire race, to our history, to the shared history that I think we all have, good, bad, or indifferent. So it's a wonderful thing to know that we're able to celebrate it, that we're able to instill hope and unity into our community and share it with so many people that didn't look like us. And it's just going to be a wonderful thing to continue throughout our county.
And again, I'm deeply grateful to have this as, I mean, I don't know the other communities well enough to know their practices, but at least from my perspective as a starting point,
Yes.
it inspires me in what I hope that we can bring to Pacifica someday.
Yes.
So we're going to work on that.
Yes, of course. And I'll be there to help you. So
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
I'm going to take you up on it. And you, and chip in as you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have about 14 minutes left or so, and I wanted to get some stories on the table so that we're sharing perspective. And I think that there's a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. I feel like as an elected, these are terms I hear frequently. And then depending on which board, because I serve on council, but then I serve on other boards, library, JPA, Peninsula Clean Energy, whatever. And I know that you all also serve on other boards. And so from board to board, you might hear more reference to DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, or other variations. It can almost sound buzzwordy to a point, but depending on the board, there's serious work going on. And it really is all about sharing perspective and finding solutions that we're not going to find if our boards are always made up of the exact same people with the exact same perspectives. So I thought we might take some time and just go around talking about what this diversity work means to each of you. Maybe something about how you're going about it, or how you feel about it even.
I think that's a perfect question for Maurice and myself, as our city just recently commenced and started these social equity commission. And I'm glad to report that we have just created one of the most well-resourced commission we've ever had in our city. We've dedicated over $200,000 of resources to this commission. And we've hired EJ Solution to facilitate the creations and help facilitate the discussions of this commission. It's going to be between 11 to 15 members of our communities. We want to be able to reach out to folks who really are not the usual people who come to the council meeting and speak. This will be a non-political body. We want to be able to reach out to folks, just day in and day out folks, right? Folks who are an immigrant, for example, community of color, right? Different socioeconomic spectrums. Folks who are just trying to, make their life works in our city. And what challenges do they have? And how ultimately, the ultimate goal is to figure out how we can serve them better. And in my mind, social equity, it's about how everybody feel they are being served in our city. And that comes from every aspect, between fire, between police, between every counter within our city hall, and how they come to our meeting, and whether or not they speak the language or what background they come from. Are they being heard? Can we listen to them well? Do we understand? And if, for example, someone who comes into the council meeting, and if English wasn't necessarily their first language, for example, and if we were to have a hard time understanding them, how do you think that person feels all along when we're on the dais discussing an item that pertains to his or her life for many years, and yet that person may not understand a thing about it? So we dedicated resources to have an AI software, Wordly, to do real-time translation now in our city council meeting. As we speak English in our council meeting, someone can pick up a headset and a little device that is capable of translating in real time what we're talking about, and vice versa, if there would be public speaking. So those are some of the measures that we have taken. And certainly, Maurice, I'm sure you have your perspective on it as well.
No, just the one thing that I would add is that it means representation. It goes back to my comment around value, that you see the value in me as I see the value in you. And I think if we start there, when comments happen at the dais or on Zoom, if we understand what Dr. King said, that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. So keeping that in mind, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So if you start there and build yourself out and start to say, I see you and I acknowledge your story. I see you and I acknowledge your story. I see you and I acknowledge your story. That's what this is truly about. That's what the work is. And Dr. King, President Obama would say it's not a red state, it's not a blue state. We're the United States, that whole thing. Those weren't just words.
Right.
Especially here in our county, we like to say, hey, we're the hotbed of the Democrats and we're a blue county. But guess what? There's still people here that have a voice. We need to try to listen. We may not always agree, but you start there. And so when you're saying that we have a committee, that committee is for all. It's to make sure that we give value to people, and we make sure that we understand that everyone deserves that representation, that opportunity to have a voice. And so whenever we can do that, I think that's the true work. Having patience. I don't always show it. There's a lot of fight in me. There's a lot of Fillmore still in me. But there's also a lot of love and compassion. that's in me, and I think it's in all of us. And we just have to continue to try to resist that urge, as you stated, because your story and what you've been through, it's in our DNA. A lot of the hurt that we've been through, our ancestors have been through a lot. And so that's in our DNA. And so sometimes we can respond a certain way, but sometimes it's like, hey, not that I'm numb to it, but I kind of expect it. So this is how I'm going to act, because I'm not giving you that power. And so it's something my grandma always said, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I know that might not be politically correct, so we don't want to skin cats, but it's a phrase, and it just means that we find different ways to do things. And if we're doing it by leading with love first, we're going to get to where we want to be.
But if you don't mind, I just want to tack on one thing. Yes, there's a million ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
But one thing that will always lead to the right answer, do not forget why we want to skin the cat.
Right. Yeah.
Oh. And we are experiencing a slight technical.
Okay.
We're good.
So that brings us. I want to get your perspective also on diversity, Mr. Mark.
It's. I think it's great that Millbrae is doing this. In South City, we did something very similar. We decided to do something after the murder of George Floyd, because that's what the community was hurting at afterwards. And so we put together a racial and social equity commission that was comprised of different folks and different communities to talk about how we can heal. How can we reach out to the community that feels like they're not being heard? And what came out of it was all these different initiatives. One was working with a group called the Promotores, where we would have regular residents, we would hire them to do outreach to the Latinx community and ask them, what services do you need? How can we help you? They have become a voice for us so we can hear what the community needs. Second, we worked with the county to get a mental health specialist embedded within our police department, because we wanted to de-escalate any situation where someone who was having a mental health situation, could get the assistance. And I get the police reports every night. And the work that this mental health condition has done has probably saved countless lives. And then we also said that we wanted to make this commission permanent. So we created a commission that you guys are doing right now, and it's comprised of 7 individuals as well, where if they feel like there's something wrong in the community or they're not being heard, they can go to this community, this commission, and say, these are the issues that are happening to me. And then they report back to us to say, these are some potential legislative fixes we can do in the community. And it's amazing of the work that's been done so far. It's kind of a ground up kind of movement where the council isn't pushing or making the agenda, it's coming from the community members themselves. And so I applaud my friends from Millbrae kind of doing the same route. I'm telling you right now, you're gonna find this experience valuable. And the information and the healing and the work that you're going to be doing, it's going to make a tremendous impact on your community. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is extraordinary the work that's going on in our county, if not but between 2 communities. And I think that in our county, We have what is referred to often amongst us as the San Mateo County Way, in which we come together on a regular basis, we share ideas with one another on a constant basis, and we support one another to whatever extent we can. It's a beautiful thing in our county specifically. I hear in Santa Clara sometimes it gets a little bit more contentious on occasion. And I'm sure that they find their way just fine too. I have good friends down there. But I do think that it really is a pleasure and a joy serving amongst, here is just a sample of 3 of many, many in our county. We're just about ready to wrap up. We've got about 2 minutes left, I think. Maybe like a sentence or 2 to kind of wrap up where you're at, what you're feeling, maybe something that's helpful in terms of either those challenges we face out of the darkness, or those opportunities we may have in the many views that we can call upon.
I'll say that going through this experience, I know that I'm not alone, and that there are people who will walk with me in terms of this fight, you might say. To say that the injustices, the vile comments are absolutely wrong, and people will stand up with you. And I think that shows more strength than anything.
Maurice, what do you think?
I've thought about it a lot, and transparency is important. Access is important, but responsibility, mutual responsibility is equally important. And so making sure that we, again, like I said, lead with love, lead with a sense of leadership, of true leadership and stewardship, we will be able to hold those individuals accountable for their words and lack of courage, and truly move our cities forward.
30 seconds, last word.
I'm in this line of work for a little bit of time, but one thing that helps me, especially during difficult decision, is to never forget why I do what I do, the purpose why I'm here. In the Asian community, it's oftentimes difficult to explain to people why public service is so important. And even I have to spend a lot of time convincing my mother why I do what I do. But I was able to do one time that she was going to a hospital, and she was able to speak Chinese with the people who are serving her. And I asked my mother, if it hasn't my predecessor who worked on this, who do this important work, you wouldn't be able to have this person serving you. And that convinces her.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Thank you for coming together in our community to shine some light and some love. And I'm so grateful to have you all. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.